My name is Clara, and according to my hometown, I died 5 years ago. Not disappeared, not moved away, not missing, dead. There was a funeral. There were flowers, hymns, tears, and a polished oak casket that everyone believed held my body. My parents stood in front of our church, accepting hugs and whispered condolences, while telling everyone how devastated they were to lose their only daughter in a tragic highway accident hundreds of miles from home. The strange part? I wasn't even in the same state that day. I was alive, working a double shift at a small hospital cafeteria under a different last name, completely unaware that people I had known my entire life were mourning someone who had never died. I didn't learn about my own funeral until almost 5 years later, and when I finally did, I didn't call the police. I didn't call a lawyer. I walked straight into the same church where everyone had once cried over my photograph. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to watch an entire room believe they've seen a ghost, I can tell you exactly how it looks. It begins with silence, the kind of silence so complete that even the choir forgets the next word of the hymn. But before I tell you about that Sunday morning, you need to understand why my parents decided that a dead daughter was more useful than a living one. Growing up, love in our house always came with conditions. Good grades earned affection. Obedience earned praise. Money earned everything else. My father believed children were investments. My mother believed family loyalty meant endless sacrifice. Together, they built a home where saying no was treated like betrayal. I was 22 when I left for the city with 2 suitcases, a scholarship, and the naive hope that distance would somehow make us love each other better. Instead, distance only made me their bank account. Every phone call followed the same script. First came the warm questions. "How are you, sweetheart?" Then came the real reason. The mortgage, medical bills, my cousin's tuition, my father's newest business idea. Something always needed saving. And somehow I was always expected to be the one who saved it. For years, I believed helping them meant I was being a good daughter. I had no idea. I was quietly financing the lie that would eventually erase me from my own life. The breaking point came 3 years after I moved away. The hospital where I worked announced massive budget cuts, and my position was eliminated with 2 weeks' notice. For the first time since leaving home, I wasn't sending money because I couldn't. My savings barely covered rent, groceries, and the used car that got me to job interviews. I called my mother, hoping, just once, she would ask if I was all right. Instead, the first thing she said was, "Then how are we supposed to pay the mortgage this month?" I waited for the question that never came. "Are you eating? Do you have somewhere to stay? Can we help you?" None of those words ever left her mouth. When I quietly told her I needed to focus on rebuilding my own life, she sighed with disappointment, as though I had failed an obligation instead of admitting I was struggling. My father took the phone. "If you stop helping this family," he said coldly, "don't expect to come back when life turns against you." That was the last conversation I ever had with either of them. I changed my phone number, moved to another apartment. Eventually, I found work again, at a smaller hospital in another state, and started rebuilding everything from scratch. Slowly, life became peaceful. For the first time in years, my paycheck stayed in my own bank account. I planted flowers outside my little house. I adopted an old golden retriever named Murphy. I made friends who never asked me for anything except my company. It felt strange at first. Then it felt like freedom. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, my parents were creating a very different story. At first, they told people I had become distant. Then they said I had disappeared after moving for work. When neighbors started asking uncomfortable questions, the story changed again. This time, it became permanent. According to them, I had died in a terrible highway accident. There had been no funeral home willing to transport my body. They claimed I had been cremated immediately because of legal complications. No one questioned the details. People don't investigate grief. They comfort it. The church organized a memorial service. Neighbors brought casseroles. Old classmates mailed sympathy cards. The donations began arriving within days. Money, gift baskets, even a community fundraiser to help the grieving parents. Everything my parents couldn't earn through honesty came pouring in through pity. And every time someone cried for me, someone else handed them another envelope. 5 years passed before fate finally tore their story apart. It happened because an old woman recognized me in the produce aisle of a grocery store nearly 300 miles from the town where I'd supposedly died. She stared at me as though she'd seen a miracle. Then, with trembling hands, she whispered the words that made my entire world stop. I attended your funeral." For a moment, I honestly thought the elderly woman had mistaken me for someone else. She kept staring, her shopping basket hanging forgotten from one hand, while tears slowly filled her eyes. "I'm sorry," I said gently. "I think you have the wrong person." She shook her head. "No," she whispered. "You're Clara Harper." Hearing my full name from a complete stranger sent a chill through me. She slowly reached into her purse and pulled out an old church bulletin that had been folded so many times its edges were soft. Tucked inside was a small memorial card, my photograph, the same graduation picture I'd given my parents years earlier. Above it were the words, "In loving memory of Clara Harper, beloved daughter, forever in God's hands." My knees almost gave out. I couldn't breathe. "This," I whispered, staring at the card. "Where did you get this?" "Your memorial service," she answered. 5 years ago. The grocery store suddenly felt too small, too bright, too loud. She introduced herself as Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, a retired Sunday school teacher from my hometown. Between tears, she told me everyone had mourned me. The church had been overflowing. People prayed for my parents, delivered meals for weeks, and raised thousands of dollars to help them recover after losing their daughter. Thousands of dollars. Not because I had died, but because my parents said I had. Mrs. Brooks looked at me with trembling disbelief. "Your mother still visits the church every Sunday," she said softly. "She lights a candle beneath your photograph before every service." A photograph of someone who was standing right in front of her. I drove home in complete silence. That night, I spread every memory across my kitchen table like pieces of a puzzle I had never wanted to solve. Every desperate phone call, every guilt trip, every demand for money, every accusation that I was selfish. When I finally stopped providing what they wanted, they didn't just erase me from their lives. They rewrote my existence. I barely slept. By sunrise, I had made one decision. I wasn't going to send letters. I wasn't going to argue over the phone, and I certainly wasn't going to warn them. If my parents had built their reputation on the grief of a daughter who never died, then the truth deserved witnesses. The following Sunday, I put on a simple navy blue dress, the same color I used to wear to Easter services as a little girl. I drove the familiar road back to the church I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Cars already filled the parking lot. Through the stained glass windows, I could hear the choir singing the opening hymn. My hands trembled as I reached for the heavy wooden doors. I took one deep breath. Then I stepped inside, and every face in the sanctuary slowly turned toward me. The hymn stopped in the middle of a verse. One by one, people turned in their seats until every pair of eyes in the sanctuary was fixed on me. Some looked confused. Others looked terrified. A little girl pointed toward me and whispered loudly, "Mom, isn't that the lady in the picture?" No one answered her. At the front of the church, my mother slowly stood from the first pew. The color drained from her face as though all the air had been pulled from the room. My father gripped the edge of the bench so tightly that his knuckles turned white. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the pastor lowered his Bible. "Clara?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "I'm alive." The words echoed through the sanctuary like a bell. Gasps spread across the room. Someone dropped a hymn book. An elderly woman began crying. I walked slowly down the center aisle, stopping beside the small memorial table near the altar. There was my graduation photograph, surrounded by white flowers and a candle that had apparently been lit every Sunday for 5 years. I gently picked up the framed picture and looked at it. Then I turned to face the congregation. "I never had a car accident," I said. "I never died. 5 years ago, I simply stopped sending money home after losing my job. I started a new life, changed my phone number, and tried to find peace." The church fell completely silent. I didn't know my parents had told everyone I was dead until last week. Several people turned to look at my parents. My mother tried to speak, but no words came out. Finally, my father stood. We thought she wasn't coming back," he said weakly. I looked at him for a long moment. "No," I replied. "You knew exactly where I was not. You just needed a story that earned more sympathy than the truth." No one applauded. No one shouted. The silence was far more powerful. The pastor slowly removed my photograph from the memorial table and handed it to me. "I'm sorry," he said. "We believed what we were told." "I know," I answered gently. So did everyone else. I walked toward the doors, holding the picture that had once been used to mourn a life I was still living. Outside, the morning sun felt warmer than I remembered. Behind me, I heard the church bells begin to ring. I didn't look back. Some people spend years trying to prove they matter to those who only value what they can give. I learned something different. The greatest freedom isn't making people regret losing you. It's refusing to let their lies define the life you're still blessed to live. That Sunday, my parents lost the sympathy they had built on a lie. But I gained something they could never take from me again. My own name, my own truth, and finally, my own peace. Thanks for watching and subscribe to the channel for amazing stories.